Of course, the definition of a variable in social science research also looked at the different types of variables. Well, we said we had the independent, dependent, and then mediator and moderator variables. And during that time, I requested each person to identify the context for their research, where they want their research to be, with a supply chain or public procurement. And then after identifying the context, you identify the dependent variable. Because next week will be physical, and we are going to see how we write the background. Because like I said, we are going to act while we read while we are writing. So we shall go through writing the background, and basically when we are writing our background, we mainly focus on the dependent, and then, like I said, we work backwards, that based on the dependent, review literature to identify the independent variables. Because people ask, how did you arrive at the independence you have in your conceptual framework? So we have to show that. That is why I said context and the dependent variable. And then we work backwards to identify, through reviewing literature, to identify the independent variables. So we also looked at other categorizations, where we had the categorical and then the continuous. And here emphasis was put under the categorical. We had the ordinal and then nominal variables, which I put on emphasis because if you are conducting a quantitative data, we normally use the ordinal scales. And then, of course, the nominal, there are certain variables, though we don't take them to be variables, but they normally belong to the category of sample characteristics. Most of all, the individuals or respondent characteristics, where you look at age, you look at marital status, you look at education, etc. That there are those variable aspects that you may include in your questionnaire, but you may not have an order in which these variables may be lined up. So like marital status or even gender. So they may belong to the nominal, but in the questionnaire, they are under the sample characteristics for the respondents. And then there are those other factors that will be under the sample characteristics for the firms you may be doing your research in, like the firm size. And then certain firm size could be ordinal, and then we could look at firm age. Firm age could be ordinal, etc. So for the type of firm or category, if somebody is working in manufacturing firms, they could categorize those firms, and then the categories, of course, are nominal, because for the categories, whether beverage or maybe food making, they may not have a certain order in which they have to be presented. So the last time we ended up with academic writing, because we said in academia we have a certain way in which we have to lay out the information we are putting down. And there, in the last lecture, we looked at the characteristics, and now I'll correct the spelling for characteristics of good academic writing. We said it should be formal and unbiased, that our arguments should be based on evidence, which evidence should have a source. Say they should be clear and precise, that we should write from our field is able to read and understand what we are saying, and the language we use should include that in such a way that somebody has multiple meanings for a given sentence, that the meaning should be one that if ever everybody reads, they should be understanding it in the same way. That we shouldn't expect multiple meanings from what we've written. And then we looked at our writing being focused and well structured. At focused, it's normally the research questions or research objectives that will guide on how we write. That is why in each research we should have research objectives and research questions. And at times others go an extra mile and derive research hypotheses. Though at a master's level, I know some supervisors may ask for research hypotheses, but for me, I think research questions and objectives are enough. But if your supervisor asks you to derive research hypotheses or put research hypotheses at the end of the discussion of each literature for each objective, then please go ahead and put the hypotheses. We shall give examples on how these hypotheses are written, because some hypotheses may be directional. Either they could be written in such a way that they point to a positive direction or negative, depending on what we find in the literature. Or they could be non-direction. But some scholars maybe find a negative influence of a specific variable that could be taken to be independent on the dependent, and then others could find a positive influence. So you find that you cannot take position but to state a non-directional hypothesis. So that is specific to certain supervisors who may want to have those hypotheses stated, though the others who may not need them. Like for me, I can't ask for them. Then in the structure, we said you look at the overall, the way the entire maybe section that you're writing about appears. So it could be a background. It could be maybe if you're writing on your objectives. So for example, writing on the relationship between, like last time I gave information sharing and supply chain performance. So normally, even when you're writing articles for those who go into research, people do not want long sentences, and normally for each write-up, people need an introduction and a conclusion, and then the body. Long sentences should be avoided. Like I gave a person writing about something and they have a sentence that is 4 lines. Such sentences are not desired. And in most cases, for those who write articles for publication, editors will always recommend that the sentences are shortened. And then for paragraphs, we say there should be a connection between one paragraph and another. But if we are transitioning to a new paragraph, then our new paragraph, the first sentence should be able to connect with the previous paragraph. And in those paragraphs, we should have a topic sentence. A topic sentence, that first sentence, states what is going to be discussed in the rest of the parts of that given paragraph. And normally we could use transition terms or words while transiting from one paragraph to another, which I have in the PowerPoint slide. We shall look at them. And then we should also mind about still sentences, that one sentence should lead to another. Not having, we have a paragraph, then the writer has one sentence talking about something else, and then the following sentence also talking about a different thing. That all the sentences in the paragraph should speak to the topic sentence. We are going to look at that. We are going to take a sample of articles and we shall see what a topic sentence is. We look at the topic sentence of each paragraph, and then we see what is discussed inside those paragraphs. And then we talked about the information we put in our write-ups should come from the right sources or desired sources, and we said people are referencing Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not desired. Others in the literature review, they bring in newspapers. Newspapers could be well-based for a problem. If we are taking our problem and we are sourcing, we are quoting them, but not in the literature review section. Others even go an extra mile